My name is Samantha, 35 years old, and I work in tax accounting in Dallas, Texas. That morning, I chose the gray suit I always reserved for pivotal moments, those rare turning points when life shifts on its axis. And I knew, without question, this was one of them. The law firm was in the heart of the financial district, third floor, still faintly scented with polished wood. Each step of my heels echoed against the marble, a steady drumbeat that matched my pulse. The conference room was long, the walnut table gleaming under soft yellow light, but nothing could warm the chill that radiated from my family. My mother Eleanor glanced at me like I was a late barista. My father Charles gave a nod without looking, and my brother Greg leaned back in his chair, legs crossed, sunglasses still perched on his head like he was waiting for the waiter to bring wine. My grandfather's lawyer, Mr. Harris, opened the folder, his voice so calm it bordered on merciless. We are here today to carry out the final wishes of Mr. Harold Whitaker. I sat at the far end of the table, silent. The kind of silence I'd mastered since childhood, when speaking up only made things worse. Mr. Harris scanned the room, then unfolded a carefully creased document. His voice was even. To Gregory Whitaker, Mr. Harold leaves the 1971 Harley-Davidson and his collection of hunting knives. Greg raised an eyebrow. What? That's it? Mr. Harris didn't respond. He kept reading. To Mr. Charles and Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker, Mr. Harold leaves the antique Steinway piano and a charitable donation of $10,000 made in their name to the local community foundation. My mother choked like she'd swallowed gravel. My father sat up straight, his face flushing red. This is ridiculous. And I kept waiting. Every nerve braced. Then Mr. Harris looked straight at me, no hesitation. To Samantha Whitaker, Mr. Harold leaves his entire financial estate, including all stocks, real estate holdings, and bank accounts, totaling $27 million. No one spoke for the first 3 seconds. Then, chairs scraped. Greg shot to his feet. What the hell is this? My mother gasped like she'd been shoved. My father roared. She left 8 years ago, not a call, not a message, and now she walks in like a damned queen and takes everything? I said nothing. There was nothing I needed to justify. I knew exactly what I'd lived through during those 8 years, and why I had to leave. Mr. Harris didn't flinch. This will was signed and notarized 3 months prior to Mr. Harold's death. All amendments are fully legal. I felt their eyes lock onto me, 3 blades twisting into my shoulders. My father lunged across the table, grabbing the envelope from Mr. Harris. Give me that. I reacted instinctively. What are you doing? He didn't answer. He tore open the envelope, pulled out the check, and held it up as if to verify it was real. My mother yanked the letter, my grandfather's personal note to me, from his hand. She crushed it, ripped it to shreds until the words were gone. Silent? You call that loyalty? She hissed. That's betrayal. Greg scoffed. We were at the hospital when he died. You vanished. Don't pretend Grandpa left it to you because you earned it. I didn't respond. Some things don't deserve a rebuttal, especially from people who only understand control. My father pulled a lighter from his suit pocket and flicked it to the corner of the check. No one in this family buys their way back. Not even with $27 million. I watched the flames curl the paper, smoke rising like incense over a trust, long cremated. Good, my mother muttered, eyes unblinking. Now we're even. I didn't say a word when they burned the check. I just sat there, hands resting lightly on my lap, breath steady, eyes focused through the thin veil of smoke. When my father placed the smoldering ashes into the crystal ashtray at the center of the table, I stood, calmly, as if wrapping up a routine office meeting. No one knew that the check, the carefully printed figure of $27 million, signed in my grandfather Harold's round, neat handwriting, was a replica. A custom-printed copy I'd made myself at a print shop 2 weeks ago. The real check had never been inside that envelope. Grandpa and I had planned it. Nearly 3 months ago, at a quiet cafe in Fort Worth, he pulled me into the farthest corner where the warm lighting made us look like characters in an old film. He handed me a plain brown envelope marked only with his shaky handwriting. For Samantha, only when they show their teeth? You know they won't let you go quietly, he said, voice low and steady. So we need them to think they've already won. I opened the envelope at home. Inside were a small silver USB drive, a sheet with secure banking access codes, and a notarized document stating that the entire estate, real estate, stocks, financial holdings totaling $27 million, had already been transferred into the Whitaker Legacy Trust, under my name. The account was held at a private bank in Boston, with access restricted solely to me and the trust's administrator. I placed everything in a small safe hidden behind a bookshelf, concealed by an old oil painting. I made 3 backup copies of the USB, one in my office, one in a bank deposit box, and one in the pendant I'd worn every day for the past 10 years. The envelope my grandfather prepared for the will reading was part of the act. A handwritten letter, the original, expressed his love and sorrow for staying silent too long. I kept that. The one my mother tore up today was just a thin paper photocopy, folded gently to mimic age. I remember the last line of the real letter. Silence is the sharpest weapon. Let them believe they've erased you. And when their backs are turned, stand tall, as you always have. I left the law office without looking back. A rental car was waiting in the underground garage. The driver opened the door without a word. I slid into the back seat, pulled out my phone, and logged into the Trust's app. It required facial recognition, a PIN, and a secondary code sent to a private number I used solely for this account. Within 60 seconds, the screen displayed. The Whitaker Legacy Trust, total assets $27,218,450.92. I locked the app and looked out the window. The city blurred past, billboards, strangers, other lives that had nothing to do with mine. But inside me was a storm. Not rage, clarity. Ruthless clarity. I didn't need to scream to reclaim justice, I just had to act when the time was right. That afternoon, I returned to my apartment in Uptown. I didn't turn on the lights. I needed the darkness to think. I set my bag on the chair, took off my coat, and opened the hidden safe behind the painting. Inside remained the USB, the original envelope, Grandpa's real letter, and one thing no one knew existed, a voice recording of my grandfather, clearly stating each item of the will. I inserted the USB into my laptop, extracted the audio file, and launched my backup software. As the encrypted copies uploaded to 3 separate cloud servers, I opened a new document, list of top federal inheritance dispute attorneys. They wouldn't stop now that they'd been cut out. I knew that. They'd strike back, maybe through legal loopholes, media, or worse. But this time, they weren't dealing with the weak daughter who ran away. They were up against a woman who knew the rules, prepared for years, and had nothing left to lose, except the illusion of family they once used to control me. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Someone in your family just did something very serious. I clenched the phone, my palm suddenly cold and damp. I checked the message again, no signature, no sender info, just one cold line. Someone in your family just did something very serious. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as a meaningless threat. But my intuition, that same instinct that had saved me during the years I lived alone, with no family, no safety net, told a different story. I opened my laptop, intending to transfer a small amount to the newly opened secondary account, but as I entered the login code, the screen displayed a red message. Account not found. I tried again, carefully entering each character. Still the same. I switched to the trust fund app. Usually it took less than 10 seconds to access, but today the authentication code didn't come to my phone. I checked my messages. Nothing. I tried calling customer service. The automated voice said, "This phone number is no longer associated with any accounts in our system." I straightened up in my seat, heart pounding. The feeling was familiar, like someone had yanked the floor out from under me without warning. I opened a browser tab and accessed the Social Security number verification system. Entered my personal information. Hit confirm. Results: the Social Security number had been deactivated due to the account holder being deceased. I held my breath. Read it again. And again. Deceased? I checked my public personal records. A scanned copy of a death certificate appeared. Samantha Eleanor Whitaker, born May 12, 1987, died March 2nd this year. Cause? Car accident, verified by dental records. I removed my hands from the keyboard and fell back in my chair. The apartment suddenly felt unnervingly quiet. It wasn't just about money or reputation. They were trying to erase me from the world. On paper, in legal systems, and if necessary, from the memories of anyone who ever knew my name. I called the Texas Civil Records Office, trying to keep calm as I spoke to the receptionist. Hi, I need to check on something. I just discovered a death record filed under my name. Please provide your social security number and identification. I read each number slowly. Silence on the other end. Ma'am, this number was deactivated 2 weeks ago. According to our system, Miss Samantha Whitaker is deceased. The record was submitted by North Park Community Hospital. You're speaking to me. You know I'm not dead. I need to know who submitted that file. I'm sorry, I can't release that information over the phone. You'll need to come in person with identity verification documents. The problem is, I don't have any valid ID, I said, my voice shaking slightly, because you already declared me dead. The receptionist went silent. I understand. Please go directly to the main office in Austin. You'll need to confirm your identity as soon as possible. I ended the call, still holding my phone. They didn't just want to take my inheritance. They wanted to make sure I could never claim anything again. Because if a person is legally deceased, every contract, asset, account, and benefit gets frozen or easily transferred to someone else. I tried logging into my credit account, card disabled. Tried the DMV, driver's license revoked. Anywhere I had ever left a trace now only showed one word: deceased. I exhaled hard through my nose, stood up and opened the desk drawer, pulled out the envelope I had hidden away, an old passport with my mother's maiden name, a copy of my college graduation photo, unused birth certificate copies. It wasn't enough. I needed real proof I was alive. I needed a witness, original documents, and someone willing to speak for me. I opened my old personal email, the one I used for academic records back in college. An unread message appeared, sent 3 weeks ago from an unknown address. It's no coincidence they chose North Park Hospital. I used to work there, and I still have a scan of the original file before it was altered. At the bottom, if you're alive, come to Crestwood Public Library, 3rd floor, 7 p.m. tonight. Don't come alone. I looked at the clock, 6:12. I still had time, but that also meant someone knew I'd been erased, and they knew I'd strike back. I changed clothes, slipped the USB into my coat pocket, locked my apartment door, and didn't forget the most important thing, a small bronze key my grandfather once gave me, saying, "One day, you'll need to open a door no one else believes exists." I arrived at Crestwood Library at exactly 7 p.m. The 3rd floor was deserted. Fluorescent lights cast a pale glow over long wooden tables, and the silence was deep enough to hear the wind slipping through old window frames. A woman sat in the far corner, hands resting on a thick file. Pale blue coat, silver hair neatly tied back, gray eyes behind thin glasses. When I stepped closer, she nodded. "Samantha Whitaker?" I nodded slightly. "And you are?" "I'm Eleanor Brooks. I used to manage data at North Park Hospital, and I have a piece of the truth they couldn't bury." She slid the file toward me. "This is the original death certificate before someone altered it." I flipped through the pages. Under cause of death, it was blank. No dental confirmation, no coroner's report, and the physician's signature was replaced by a faded stamp that didn't match any practicing doctor in the system. The person who filed this into the system was named Margaret Whitaker. Eleanor looked up at me. Your sister-in-law. I nodded, my throat dry. But she doesn't work at the hospital. That means someone on the inside helped her. I turned to the last page. An internal access code? Only IT staff could generate that. I kept this as my own insurance. I never meant to get involved until I saw your name on the deceased registry. That's when I knew this wasn't just family business anymore. I thanked her and slid the file into my bag. Before I turned to leave, Eleanor pressed a small object into my hand, a metal key attached to a plastic tag labeled 8. You should go to Langford Vault. I don't know what's inside, but Mr. Harold once rented box number 8. 3 weeks before he passed, he called me to verify a security code for a special courier. I think he left something for you. The next morning, I drove to Langford Vault, a private asset storage facility on the western edge of Dallas. No signage on the building, only a steel door and a suited guard outside fogged glass. I presented my ID, key, and access code. After several minutes of verification, the attendant led me into the basement. The air carried the scent of pine wood and cold steel. Box number 8 sat in the far corner. When the door opened, I stood before a large metal safe, its face engraved with a horse, exactly like the one Grandpa used to sketch on his cigar boxes. I opened the safe. Inside was a brown leather briefcase, a red wax sealed envelope, a silk-wrapped USB drive, and a bank check worth $27,218,450 in my name. I held my breath. Everything inside was real. The check was signed in the round cursive I'd seen every birthday growing up. At the bottom, the seal of Whitestone Trust and Capital Bank. I picked up the sealed envelope. On the outside, only 3 words in his handwriting. Hey, open after fire. I opened it. Inside was Grandpa's letter. If you're reading this, it means they burned the fake, and you've kept your promise, silent but aware. Samantha, you weren't chosen because you're the only granddaughter. You were chosen because you never sold yourself for affection. They use love as leverage. You don't. That's why you will inherit this legacy. Not just the money, but the true meaning of the Whitaker name. I set the letter down, pulled out the USB, and plugged it into the laptop I'd brought. A video file popped up. Final message, H. Whitaker. I hit play. Grandpa sat in his old study, bathed in amber lamplight, oak bookshelves behind him. His voice was raspy but steady. If they're trying to erase you, it's because they fear you. And when power fears truth, it'll do anything to make you invisible. He paused. But you're not invisible. You're the only one who kept your name without losing your soul. He looked straight into the camera, his eyes burning with a clarity I hadn't seen before. Don't retaliate. Speak. And remember, you don't have to reclaim your place in this family, because the truth is you never left it. They're the ones who walked away from the values of the Whitaker name. The video ended. I sat there for a long while, clutching the check, the USB, and the letter. The anger inside me had turned into something else. Resolve. I knew exactly what I had to do next. And I knew I wasn't walking alone anymore. When I left Langford Vault, it was already late afternoon. The golden light at the end of the day fell across the concrete steps like a thin, deceptive curtain. Peaceful, but not real. I had just stepped onto the curb when I noticed it. Across the street, next to a rusted-out phone booth, stood a woman. She wasn't exactly staring at me, but her eyes behind the oversized sunglasses hadn't left me for even a second. I recognized that scarf. Pale blue with white trim, embroidered with the initials E.W., short for my mother's name, Eleanor Whitaker. That silk scarf had been a birthday gift I gave her when I turned 18, wrapped in silver paper with a letter I never knew if she read. 3 years ago, my mother said the scarf had been lost on a trip, but now It was around the neck of a complete stranger. She stepped into a gray sedan, no front license plate. I only caught one last glance before the car pulled away, blending into the traffic heading toward the suburbs. I clenched my purse, my hands still slightly trembling. This wasn't a scare tactic anymore. It was a message. Someone was telling me, we can follow every step you take, and we know what you hold dear. When I got home, I shut the door, pulled the curtains, turned off all the lights, and opened my backup laptop, the one that's never been connected to the internet. I keep it only for sensitive searches, and today, I needed to know who was pulling the strings. I logged into the email system of my grandfather's old company, Whitaker Minerals and Holdings, where he had held a board seat until he retired. I used to have access as a Tier 2 shareholder, but the system now required new authentication. After a few minutes navigating through hidden links I'd saved, I managed to access an internal account labeled mholder at whhd.group. There was one unread email. The subject line read, "They're faking the ballots." I clicked to open it. The body contained only one sentence. On March 12, a special shareholder meeting was held without the legal heir present. Minutes were signed by Charles, Margaret, and Gregory Whitaker. Mr. Harold's signature was forged. And attached was a file, a scanned transfer document handing full company control to Gregory Whitaker, the forgery glaringly obvious. I nearly lost my balance. They didn't just want to erase me, they orchestrated a fake meeting, signed on behalf of the deceased, and funneled all corporate assets to Greg. If this got approved and legalized, I'd lose everything. The inheritance and my grandfather's stake in the company he had spent 40 years building. I printed the file. Each page was a piece of evidence in a scheme larger than I had imagined. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a coordinated inheritance heist, weaponizing the legal system to legitimize what they had no right to own. I returned to the safe, grabbed handwritten letters, a video file from vault number 8, and the original will. Everything was immediately backed up to 3 private secured servers I'd hired. All data was encrypted with a personal key only I held. I called the law office I had once interviewed at 3 years ago. The current lead attorney was Sylvia Grant, a specialist in estate and federal inheritance disputes. I had been impressed by how she handled a signature fraud case back then, and now I needed that experience. When I said my name, she paused for 3 seconds. "You said Samantha Whitaker?" she asked, voice low. "Yes. But if you search for my name in the system, it might show as deceased." She drew a breath. "You can come to my office tomorrow. No need to say more over the phone. Address, 9th floor, Branton Building, Dallas, elevator code 9045. I hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, city lights flickering in the distance. In my hand was the old silk scarf I'd found in a mailbox left at my door, the same as the one that woman wore. Except this one had dried blood on the edge. No note, no sender, just a clear signal that I was being watched and possibly hunted. I looked straight into the mirror. I wasn't the terrified girl who left home 8 years ago anymore. This time, I wouldn't run. I was going to uncover the truth, and I would not go quietly. I arrived at the Branton Building at exactly 8:30 a.m. the next morning. The sun hadn't turned harsh yet, but the air was dry, typical of a May morning in Dallas. The 9th floor greeted me with the scent of freshly cleaned carpet and the rapid clicking of keyboards behind the reception desk. The office door bore a silver nameplate, Sylvia Grant, Estate and Federal Litigation. Sylvia wasn't what I had imagined. No black suit or cold television lawyer demeanor. She wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, her silver hair neatly tied back. But when she looked at me, her gaze sliced through every defense I had built. "You're here," she said, like we'd met in another lifetime. "I've got the meeting room ready." The small room had gray walls, a heavy wooden table, and leather chairs. On the table were a laptop preloaded with encryption software, a high-speed document scanner, and an unlabeled file folder. I need to know everything, she said. No guessing, no blanks. I placed the following items on the table: a USB containing Grandpa's video, the original will, handwritten letters, the real check, a copy of the forged documents, Vault No. 8 records, internal emails from the company, and the falsified death certificate. She didn't overreact, just nodded and started scanning each item into the system. Harold's signature on this document, she pointed at the paperwork Charles and Greg had used to call the fake board meeting, doesn't match any legally recognized sample. I know. They forged it, I replied quietly. Not just forgery. This is corporate fraud, estate manipulation, and, if proven intentional, we could push for a federal investigation into elder abuse and asset seizure through psychological coercion. I leaned forward. You mean they could face criminal charges? Not just could. If we can prove Harold was coerced into signing an outdated will while cognitively impaired, we're looking at a criminal case involving abuse of a legally incapacitated person. Sylvia pushed her glasses up her nose. And if they faked your death certificate to hide the asset transfer? That's identity fraud, a very serious federal offense. I sat still for a moment, letting words like abuse, fraud, criminal sink in. Do you think I'll win? I asked. Sylvia looked up, her eyes firm. I don't take cases to lose. I take them when I see the truth. And the truth, when backed by evidence, it's heavy as stone. No one can push back against it. We spent the entire morning backing up the data into 3 separate encrypted servers, organized under categories: legal will, document forgery, elder abuse, identity fraud, and unlawful corporate transfer. She also instructed me to create a sworn affidavit outlining every step I had taken from learning about the inheritance to discovering my erasure from the system. We need to name the case file, she said, tapping the table. Something that forces the court to look. I looked at her. Call it Whitaker Inheritance Unmasked. She smiled. You're not just a survivor, you're a navigator. By noon, we ordered takeout, though I couldn't eat. Part nerves, part exhaustion. My phone kept ringing from unknown numbers. I didn't answer. Sylvia had been clear. From now on, you don't speak to anyone tied to this, especially not family. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Even my mother? I asked. Especially your mother. She paused, eyes sharp as blades. Because she's the only one with motive and access to trigger the fake death report. And from what I'm seeing, the hospital signature matches Eleanor's handwriting sample. The whole room seemed to turn cold, like someone had opened a window and let the wind cut through my chest. By late afternoon, the lawsuit package was complete, sealed, and sent to the Northern District Federal Court of Texas. Sylvia also submitted a copy to the Inspector General at the Department of Justice, along with Harold's final video as a sworn statement. You're done running, Sylvia said as she walked me to the door. From here on, you walk in daylight, and they can't keep hiding. I stepped into the street, the afternoon sun softening. In my coat pocket was the certified copy of the documents, and in my mind, my grandfather's voice echoed. Let them think they're powerful, then show them. Truth never dies. Courtroom 4B of the Northern District Federal Court of Texas was packed that morning, not because of me, but because of the name Whitaker, a family once owning dozens of mineral mines from Oklahoma to New Mexico, now entangled in accusations of forged wills, inheritance fraud, and elder abuse. I entered the courtroom with attorney Sylvia beside me. Every step echoed clearly across the cold marble floor. My father, Charles, sat on the right bench, his face stiff as chiseled stone. My mother, Eleanor, appeared calm, but her hands trembled. And Greg, my brother, looked like he had just walked out of a late party. Wrinkled shirt, loosened tie, and that trademark smirk of someone who thinks the law is a joke. Judge Davis entered. Silver hair, lean frame, eyes sharp enough to cut through flowery arguments. He didn't say much, just nodded and signaled to begin. Sylvia stood first. Your Honor, she began calmly, we are here today not only to clarify the rightful inheritance of my client, Ms. Samantha Whitaker, but to expose a chain of deliberate and serious violations aimed at an elderly individual and a legal heir in an attempt to seize assets and erase her identity as a citizen. She presented the case file divided into 7 sections. Each document was numbered, certified, and verified. The final valid will of Mr. Harold Whitaker, complete with signature, a recorded signing session, and confirmation from notary Edna Morales, who was present during the signing. A video testament from Mr. Harold, filmed in his private study 3 weeks before his passing, stating clearly, I leave all financial assets and control of the business to Samantha, the only one who never asked anything of me but always understood the true value of the Whitaker name. The forged death certificate, showing signs of tampering from North Park Hospital, with original records provided by Eleanor Brooks, a former staff member. Forged internal documents, copies of business transfer forms signed with a duplicated version of Harold's signature. Internal email transcripts, revealing coordination between Charles, Greg, and Margaret, Greg's wife, in staging an unauthorized board meeting. When the video played showing my grandfather in his study, his voice deep and clear. If you're watching this, they've shown their faces. You know this. Money can't redeem a name. Only truth can. The entire courtroom fell silent. Then the family's lawyer stood, a tall man with brown hair and rimless glasses named Bennett. He tried to claim that Harold was slightly senile, emotionally compromised when writing the will. Sylvia didn't flinch. Your Honor, if he were senile, then how could he articulate every name, every figure, and lay out a systemized plot so precisely in this video? And it had no answer. Judge Davis looked down at the documents, then back up, his gaze sharp as a blade. After reviewing the evidence, video footage, notarized confirmations, and independent witness statements, this court determines that the only valid will is the one signed on February 3rd of this year, naming Samantha Whitaker as the sole heir to all financial assets and business holdings of Harold Whitaker. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I just sat upright, palms quietly clenched. The judge continued, furthermore, this court orders a federal investigation into Charles Whitaker, Eleanor Whitaker, and Gregory Whitaker for the following charges: falsifying legal documents, elder coercion, corporate fraud, and violations of federal identity protection statutes. Greg shot up from his seat. She staged all of this? She's the runaway? You will sit down. The judge's voice was low but firm, and you'd best prepare a solid defense. You're going to need it. When the trial concluded, I stepped out into the harsh midday sun. Reporters swarmed. Cameras pointed. Flashbulbs flickered like waves crashing against the shore. A woman shouted, "Do you have anything to say to your parents after all this?" I paused, turned toward the lens. They thought they were burning money, but what really burned that day was their last chance to be decent human beings. I walked away. Behind me, quieter than any family gathering I'd ever endured, but inside me, for the first time in years, was the sound of my own voice, untouchable by anyone. 3 weeks after the trial, the name Samantha Whitaker appeared everywhere: financial headlines, local news, and national legal forums, but no one asked about the money. Everyone focused on one question. How did a woman erased from the legal system stand before the court and reclaim everything that was rightfully hers? I didn't give interviews. I didn't appear on talk shows. I declined invitations from major news outlets. I simply posted a short message on my personal page with an old photo of me and my grandfather. They said enough the day they burned the only love that ever truly saw me. No further explanation was necessary. The following week, I returned to Fort Worth, where my grandfather once lived. The old 2-story wooden house with a wide porch and wild white daisies blooming around the yard, where quiet summers once unfolded, with honey-glazed roast chicken dinners and jazz music on the radio. I opened the door, dust thick on the brass handle, floorboards creaking under every step. But the house was intact, as if he had just stepped out, and would be back by late afternoon. I spent the whole day cleaning, hauling down boxes from the attic. Inside were handwritten letters he had written to me, small wooden toys, and my childhood drawings he had kept. No one ever told me he cared that much, but he preserved it all in silence, while the rest of the world screamed to erase me. I found the brown leather notebook he always carried. On the first page he had written, "Not everything loud is right. Sometimes, quiet persistence is the strongest form of defiance." I closed the notebook and placed it on the wooden shelf in the study. This would be my new office, not in a towering skyscraper in downtown Dallas, but in the very home that raised values no money could measure. A month later, I completed the federal process to restore my identity. The name Samantha Whitaker was officially reinstated. My social security number was reactivated. Driver's license, bank accounts, medical records, everything returned to its rightful place. But I didn't go back to my old job. I didn't buy a new car or move into the rumored penthouse. Instead, I used a small portion of the estate to establish the Whitaker Foundation, a legal aid fund for those manipulated, cut off from inheritance, or silenced in family disputes. On the foundation's opening day, I received an unmarked envelope with no sender's name. Inside was a note. "We didn't think you'd make it this far, but now we understand why he chose you." I didn't keep it. I burned it. As a symbol, I no longer needed late apologies. As for my family, Greg left the state not long after the trial. Word is he's trying to start a company in Arizona, but with the ongoing criminal investigation, every door remains shut. My mother, Eleanor, avoided all media, cut off contact with old friends. My father stayed silent. No statements, no apologies. But that no longer hurt me. I stopped looking for remorse from those who once saw me as a weed to be uprooted. I didn't call. I didn't block their numbers. I simply let them fade out of my life, just as they once faded me out of theirs. One June afternoon, I stood on the porch with a glass of mint tea, watching neighborhood kids pedal by the gate. A curly-haired girl paused, looked up at me, smiled, and waved. "Are you the lady who won the court case on TV?" I smiled. "I'm just the woman who got her name back, sweetheart." She nodded as if she understood, then rode off, her laughter trailing in the breeze. I turned back inside, closed the door, and for the first time in years, I turned on the music. Not to drown out emptiness, but because, finally, life was quiet. And I, Samantha Whitaker, no longer live under a name others forced on me. I reclaimed my true identity, not through revenge, but through awakening. Samantha's story is proof that silence isn't always weakness. It can be the foundation of steady, intelligent resistance. In a world where identity can be erased with a forged signature, she stood up for the truth, not with revenge, but with justice. In real life, there are losses no amount of money can measure, but freedom, dignity, and your own name, those are the legacies most worth defending. What do you think about Samantha's choice? Would you have done the same in her situation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.